If the next big day of protest is not until Labor Day, is it an indication that the left failed to launch this summer? Things seem overall quiet since the No Kings protest. Well, I've been saying last year that there will not be a failure to launch this year because there will be no launch this year. I was back actually 1 year ago, almost today, I started having, and I mentioned this in the reports, having serious doubts that 2025 would pop off at all. And even after in the week before the election, a couple weeks before the election, I said, Trump's going to win and the far left's probably not going to do anything. And a lot of people disagreed with me. Actually, there were videos on YouTube making fun of me for saying the far left is not going to do anything. And they didn't, and they haven't. And so one of the things I've been saying since last fall is there's not going to be, and I've said this on a bunch of podcast interviews as well, and a lot of people disagree with me, which is fine. But listen, I don't swing for a grand slam very often, but occasionally I will have one of those grand slam epiphanies or grand slam assessments, and I stick to it. And, you know, this is one of the cases where you go out of, anytime you have a prediction or anytime you say something that is counterintuitive or goes against the whatever's in the zeitgeist, you go out on a limb. All right. It's like a huge credibility issue. Because if you're wrong, like if I'm wrong, people are going to say, oh, Mike's wrong. I'm not listening to that guy. And that hurts me. And that hurts our team. And it hurts Forward Observer. I mean, it hurts everything we do. So when I do go out on a limb and I swing hard, I think people should pay attention because I have high confidence in that assessment. So I don't think there was a failure to launch because I don't think there was an attempt to launch. And 2025 is not going to be a Summer of Love 2.0. It was never going to be because they are still in this rebuilding period. You know, one of the things that I talked about earlier this week was this. There was a report back from I think it was Los Angeles. And they talked about how many new people, just green, never taken place, have never been involved in any kind of black bloc, direct action demonstration, riot, whatever, insurrectionary style violence. How many green people there were, and they showed up, and they weren't wearing the right black bloc attire. They were still wearing potentially identifiable pieces of clothing. They had the wrong masks. They didn't have the right respirators. They had goggles that were made of plastic that were not shatterproof. And shatterproof goggles is one of the things that you wear. So if they do shatter, your eyes don't get splintered out. And so this report back was just kind of like how much of a gaggle these people actually were. I read that and I say, these people are not ready. Okay, you have this cadre, this core cadre of far left militants, and there is a certain train up period. There's like a testing and evaluation period because these affinity groups, they don't just go out and say, oh, that's 15 people, great, let's go be gay and do crime. They start off with like low-level confidence targets. Again, we can go back to doctrine and read all these they're not manuals, but read all this primary source material on Antifa. If you're not reading that stuff, you don't really understand Antifa and these other far left groups. So we can go back to that and say there's a confidence building period, and they're very much in a rebuilding process. So one of the biggest reasons, I would say there are two big reasons why this has not been a summer of love, and it will not be a summer of love. Maybe three reasons. A, summer's almost halfway over already. But number one, these far left networks have atrophied, and you cannot just rebuild these networks overnight. It takes time. We go back to 2020, and the origins of the 2020 insurrection go back to 2015. So this took several years, at least 4 to 5 years to build before you have this explosion of insurrectionary violence, something that they call a revolutionary rupture. 2020 was a revolutionary rupture. And so that's the first thing, is that they're in a period of rebuilding. Okay, this is like you go fight some massive war, and your troops are tired, and it's like trying to do a second D-Day right after the first D-Day. It's like you're just not going to do that with the same troops. Probably not. So they're in a period of rebuilding, number one. Number two, conditions have changed. These people are being arrested. These city mayors, I mean, look at how much the state governor of California and LA Mayor Karen Bass and all these other people in Los Angeles came out and urged that, said, do not go out and be violent. You're playing into the Trump administration. Do not do it. Be peaceful. Go out and voice your opposition. Do not be violent. Okay. We weren't seeing that kind of rhetoric from these politicians in 2020. We were seeing riots are the voice of the unheard. And we're seeing a lot of defense and defending and excusing that type of violence of those riots. We're not seeing that today. So I think the security environment also has fundamentally changed. Last summer, I started talking about in Portland and Seattle, the police departments effectively using counterinsurgency tools against these Antifa and far left networks. So things have fundamentally changed, and that's just not an environment where you're going to launch a Summer of Love 2.0. Been saying it since last year. So this was not, just to wrap up, this is not a failure to launch. This is not a launch attempt at all. At least I would say by the brunt of that movement. All right, which came first, the atrophy of the far left or the arrest factor? Well, I think the atrophy came first because in 2020, January 21, Biden took over. Not that any of these Antifa militants liked Biden. They just hated him less than they hated Trump. And so just like when, we see this, we saw this in 2016, we saw this year. Trump gets elected. He's like, oh, everyone's like, oh, our guy's in charge now. And, everything's cool. Like, Daddy Trump's going to come in and solve all our problems. I'm not saying everyone feels like that, but I would say there's a lot of sentiment like that. And I think on the left, that was kind of the thing. Oh, we defeated fascism. We got Trump. And now we're going to throw Trump in prison for the rest of his life. And all our problems are going to be solved. And, obviously that was not the case. But that was the sentiment. And so I think there's just some natural atrophy there because there's just not a sense of urgency. One of the things that made 2020 happen was there was this sense of urgency. People believed, oh, Trump is an inch away from saying he's dictator for life. And we have to stop that. And when you don't have that sense of urgency, you're not spurred to action anymore. And you think you've defeated fascism. What? You've defeated that fascist threat, at least. And then, so your networks start to atrophy. People start to lose interest and, you stop attending meetings. And so I think the atrophy came first. And then the arrest factor really started, was that 2023? I think that Georgia RICO case started in 23, maybe it was last year. But 61, I think maybe 65 of these militants were arrested and charged under a conspiracy statute, which is this is the perfect example of a RICO case. So I would say the atrophy started first and then the arrest factor followed later.